Hey guys, it's Jazz and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do a really fun shaker card using a neat and tangled set. It's called My Favorite Nut, and we're going to use the stamps and dies for this. So I'm starting out with some Bristol Smooth cardstock. I buy this at your local craft store, should have it. I buy it in the big 11 by 14 and then cut them down. And then that way it's big enough to stamp all of my images. I can color all of them out and then fussy cut them or die cut them. I tend to die cut because I hate fussy cutting. It's one of my biggest pet peeves in crafting, so I'm a die person. But getting back to the coloring, I'm using Copics, and I just had a big drop come out of my Copic marker. So I'm using E95, which is not one of my favorite colors, to tell you the truth. I wanted a lighter, like a red-brown tone for this guy, so I tried this one out, but it's a little bit too light. But anyway, I made it work. Just kind of what you do, right? So using, let's see here. E95 was my base coat, and then I went in with E19, 23, 21, and 99 to color him. And when you do get a little boo-boo like that, let it dry, and then it's easier to kind of cover it up, if you will. When you get that much ink, your paper is oversaturated. So it can make it worse if you try to fix it when it's that wet. So you want to let it dry and then go back in, and because we're going to use browns anyway, it didn't matter because I just went over it and it covered it right up. But if it's like on the outside edge of your image and it's going to show, then you can use your colorless blender to kind of erase it. But you want to be careful with it because the colorless blender is just basically alcohol. So it's not just going to push the ink away, but it will blur it out. So if you've used red markers and tried the colorless blender, you'll see that it turns kind of pinkish and doesn't really erase it necessarily. But the red markers are the hardest to use in my experience. They're beautiful, but they're also the most problematic. So with this, it just didn't matter because I was going to color the shell brown anyway. But just use your colorless blender to kind of push the ink back where you want it, kind of erase it a little bit, let it dry, go in again, and you kind of got to erase it in layers, if you will. So I'm using E50 on his belly, just as kind of a base coat to get the paper a little bit wet. And I also like using the bigger pieces of paper like this so that if I'm not quite sure how my markers are going to blend or if the two colors are going to look nice together, I kind of scribble a little bit of ink over the top and try to blend them out a little bit on the paper I'm using. So there's the colors to the left of the screen that I used on the first squirrel. And then on the second squirrel, let's see, I'm using E23, 25, 74, and 79. So I've got 74 as kind of the mid-tone, 79 is the darkest, and then I'll blend it out using 25. And 23 is my lightest tone. So when you're looking at kind of the Copic numbering system, try not to just assume that two colors that are close in number are going to blend well together because it's not always the case. A good demonstration of that is E95 and E99. They're very different in tones and they don't blend together well, which is part of why I had to bring in 23 and 21 on the squirrel to the left, was because the 95 and 99 just weren't playing well together. They weren't friends that day. So I will apologize in advance because I lost some footage of all of the coloring. I don't have footage for the top two squirrels or how I did the shell. Some footage gremlins got me again. but I will give you the colors, and I'll have this listed in my blog post as well, so you can kind of refer back to it. I did one of the squirrels in black, so that was C6, 8, and 9. And then a gray-brown squirrel was E70, 74, and 79. The acorn I did in E15 and 19, and I used some stripy motions to kind of give it a little bit of texture, and G05 and 17 for the leaf on that. But these were a lot of fun to color because you kind of got a little bit of practice in your different brown tones and how to get different looks out of some of the same markers. So here's our acorn all colored, and I'm going to add my sentiments to it. So I'm using some Versamark. And these are sentiments from the same stamp set. So I've stamped Favorite. And I'm going to heat emboss that using some Wow Pale Rich Gold embossing powder. Metallic gold, sorry. And if you're in the market for embossing powders or collect them like I do, Wow is a fantastic brand of embossing powders. And then I've got You Are My as a sentiment. I just masked off the little curly Q at the end so it would fit on the acorn better. And that's just some masking tape over the edge, ink it, make sure you remove your masking tape, and then stamp it. I did do a couple of layers using Memento Tuxedo Black ink. So here I'm gonna jump to the background, and I've got some blueprint sketch and pine needles, regular original distress inks, tapped down on my work surface, and this is just a nonstick craft sheet I got on Amazon. And then I'm spritz with a little bit of water. You don't want too much because this cardstock that I'm using is not intended for watercolor or a lot of water on it. So you want to be careful how much water you add so you don't get any pilling. Now this is a toner sheet, meaning it's a pre-printed sheet I got from the Brutus Monroe inspiration box. And then you can run it through your laminator using foil and add foil to the toner printing. So I did that using some Heidi Swapp champagne foil. So it gives it a nice kind of antique gold, if you will, tone to it. And I thought this really went well with the squirrels. And then I'm adding some Lucky Clover to kind of get a little more bright green. And I kind of sop up any excess water that's on the surface so I don't get too much water and it doesn't dilute the ink too much. So here I've got a forest green cardstock that I've cut a frame out using 2 stitched rectangle dies. And I nested them together on a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 sheet of cardstock, ran through my die cut machine, and then it gives me about a 1/4 inch frame. And I'm going to use this to build my shaker box. So I've got 1/8 inch score tape around all the edges, and then I've got some acetate from Hero Arts, and kind of fit that to it. I do use my trimmer on the acetate just to make it easier, but don't be worried if you still need to trim some edges when you go to add your cardstock and the acetate together, because they don't always perfectly line up, but just trim the edges, you'll be fine. And I do use score tape pretty much exclusively in all my stamping because it's super strong. It doesn't fall apart and it's easy to use. Like you can tear it off or cut it, but I usually just tear it, and it's great. So to build the shaker window, I'm going to use some 3M foam tape that I have folded in half and then cut into thirds. So this is 3/4 inch wide originally, so when you cut it into thirds, you get a loose 1/4 inch wide. So that fits perfectly along the edges of my frame and it doesn't show through on the front of the card. And it gives you just enough room to allow the sequins or whatever you put inside your shakers to move around freely without them escaping. Now, if you're going to use like seed beads or glitter or anything really tiny, you want to be super careful about butting up your edges of your foam tape to one another to make sure there's no gaps. Because the last thing you want is somebody getting your shaker card and then they go to shake it and they end up with glitter all over themselves. They won't be happy with you. So yeah, just make sure your ends of your foam tape are kind of butted up to each other to make a flush seam. So now I've got our dried background, we've got our shaker window, and the sequins I've used are the Nature Pack from Pretty Pink Posh, and I've got some Blueberry Jewels from Little Things by Lucy's cards in there, just for a little bit of sparkle. Now I thought this was really suitable for a guy card or maybe an anniversary card, something like that. And to make it really guy friendly, you could just take out the little jewels in there and just use the sequins, and I think that would be really cool. My husband really liked this one. So I've got some single layer foam tape that I'm going to attach the acorn with, just so I don't get too much height on my card, but it is nice to give it a little more dimension. And then some flat score tape for my squirrel. And the Hunter Green cardstock I've used on the frame also came from Brutus Monroe. It was in the same inspiration box that I got the background in. Just got my last little squirrel there, and the card is complete. So this is a lot of fun. Fairly easy to do. Just kind of, you don't have to do all the coloring. You can just do a few of them. Kind of take this and run with it is the idea behind this. So thanks for joining me today, guys. We will catch you later, and have a great day.